when we joined NCHE and we started getting the greenhouse report back then I just started, back then you had phone chains, there was the way you communicated. And so if they needed to get a message out, they would call a person who was the head of a tree, that person would call a few people, and those people would call a few people, and that's how we communicated. There was no email. But I just remember starting to meet these people and getting phone chains and greenhouses, and then we got to know them, the other people at church. Sandy and Walt moved about that time maybe, and they were already involved with NCHE, and so we got more involved. And then we came, I guess it was 87, well, somewhere along that line, we had to sign up as a school. And there's when the Del Conte said you are a non-public school, like a private school, you were like that, you're just like that, then we had to meet all those rules. And this was between Del Conte and a homeschool law. There was this time period where we were just non-public schools. And I had to have a physical, and then we had to have all the fire escape stuff, where we had to go buy a fire extinguisher because the fire department had to come out and approve.
2 fire extinguishers.
Yeah, and by this time, it had been a year or two after, so the health department said, we are not going into people's homes. Forget if they're a homeschool type non-public school, we're not doing that anymore in Charlotte.
And when we opened our home school, during that first year, we'd have somebody from the Division of Non-Public Education come and visit our home school, and they would actually not only look at our test scores, they would get our test scores, because the legislature, the General Assembly, wanted to know how we were doing as a home schools. So we were hovering between 82 and 84 percentile. Every year they checked us. And at that time, the North Carolina public schools were also doing a nationally standardized achievement test. And they were 46 percentile, 48 percentile, 49 percentile is the highest percentile I could remember them getting during those years. And so by the 92-93 school year, they said, we don't want to see those test scores anymore. And Rod Helder, who was the director of DNPE, said, yeah, they were a little embarrassed by the homeschool scores, and so they didn't want to see it anymore. And then soon after that, North Carolina public schools don't even take nationally standard achievement scores, because we were vying with South Carolina and Mississippi for the lowest test scores in the United States, and they didn't like to be compared to other states as well. So, but every year we would have somebody from DNPE come and inspect our records. And one year, Rod Helder spent the night in our guest room. But here's the thing, they always made an appointment.
Yes.
It wasn't a surprise visit. They always made an appointment. And we were on really good terms with the Division of Non-Public Education for many years.
Then the public school system and the people that don't like homeschooling, and you've heard about this, but they presented a bill that would have made it very difficult for homeschoolers. I remember at one point we had to be certified in everything we taught, and you definitely had to have a college education, and it was just, you had to get your curriculum approved. It went through various stages of this bill.
Right.
But NCHE, this was rallying. This is where we really got involved, because we were fighting this in the legislature. NCHE organized the homeschoolers into inviting their legislators into their home to meet homeschoolers and to observe a homeschool. And if you didn't meet them in your home, you would go meet them, And so all over the state, these representatives were doing that.
We were able to stop the bill in the Senate, but in the House, the Education Committee in the House changed some of it so that you didn't have to have certification for each subject, but you did still have to have a baccalaureate in order to be able to homeschool. You had to teach state curriculum. You couldn't, it wasn't state approved, it was state curriculum you had to teach. And you had to get permission from the local superintendent of the school district that you were in for each semester you wanted to teach. And so we didn't like that at all. We tried to stop it. We didn't. It passed in the House. And it crossed, it was the very end of the long session, so it crossed over to the Senate. And we knew that when the Senate took it up in the short session in 1988, it would very likely pass unless we did something between the short session, the long session in 87 and the short session in 88. So we sent a series of 4 letters. The 4th letter we got to them was an invitation to visit a homeschool, and gave them a name of a homeschool person that would welcome them into their homeschool. So we had volunteers all over the state that were going to welcome their representative and their senator into their homeschool. We had a senator that just happened to be the chairman of the Senate Education Committee that read all 4 of our letters, and he actually visited a homeschool in Weaverville, North Carolina, and he changed his mind, and he says, okay, what do you guys want? So by that time, Herman Logan was our president, and he had been our legislative vice president the year before when we were fighting all of this. And he said, okay, here's what we want. And he put together what we wanted in a bill. And the senator said, well, I'd like to get annual testing. And so that's why we're doing annual testing. No required test score, but he wanted to see how we were doing. So we agreed to that. Our bill plus testing every year was a whole lot better than what had been passed on to the Senate. So at the committee meeting, he actually introduced our substitute bill. It was adopted unanimously in the Education Committee. Went to the floor, 2 a.m., a senator from Gastonia who was very anti-homeschool introduced that we had to have a high school diploma in order to homeschool.
We were in bed because we weren't in Raleigh. And I think I was pregnant with Merritt at the time, but probably sick. But we were in Charlotte. Herman Logan and I don't remember who else exactly.
I think Walt was there too.
Probably Walt were on the floor. They were there. And so we get a call.
And Susan Van Dyke was there.
Yeah, like at 2 o'clock in the morning about what had just happened. So I'll never forget that phone call.
Yeah,
Some of the memories.
Yeah.
It's like they're still beating. So.
Yeah. And so it went back to the House. They got it, and they unanimously passed it, so it became law. Governor Martin signed it. So we had Part 3 of Article 39, which was the homeschool law, and that's what we've been living with since 1988.